The frozen glow of Tau Ceti's light barely reached Proxima Station, casting long shadows across the crumbling habitation domes. Administrator Hyun Ki stood at the observation deck, his weathered face reflecting in the reinforced glass as he gazed at the gas giant that dominated the sky. The massive planet's swirling storms created a backdrop of blues and purples that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. "Another power failure in Sector 7, reported Subin, sliding a data tablet across the metal table. Her forearms, characteristic of her Palaxian heritage, moved with precise efficiency despite the bone-deep exhaustion evident in her amber eyes. Hyun Ki sighed, the sound echoing in the nearly empty command center. "Redirect power from the hydroponics. Lighting. 12 hours of darkness won't kill the crops, but it might kill our people if life support fails again." The Proxima Station that existed now bore little resemblance to the thriving outpost it had been just 3 years earlier. Once home to over 20,000 colonists from 17 species, its gleaming towers and bustling marketplaces had made it the crown jewel of this sector. Ships had arrived daily with supplies, visitors, and news from across the Galactic Confederation. Then came the Void Plague. No one knew exactly where it originated. Some blamed experimental weapons, others suggested an ancient pathogen released from melting ice on a distant moon. Whatever its source, the disease spread rapidly, causing entire planetary populations to fall into comas before their nervous systems disintegrated. Within months, the Confederation Council declared a quarantine of the entire sector and initiated the Great Retreat. The evacuation had been chaotic and brutally selective. Priority citizens, the wealthy, politically connected, and members of dominant species, were whisked away on sleek evacuation cruisers. Lower priority colonists watched helplessly as those ships disappeared into the darkness, carrying promises that help would return for the rest once the crisis passed. Help never came. "Administrator, we've got movement in the eastern maintenance. Tunnels again," called Do-Yun, the station's security chief. The bony ridge above his eyes, a feature of his mixed Tartaran heritage, furrowed with concern. "Probably more scavengers looking for tech to strip." Hyun Ki nodded grimly. "Take Min Ho and check it out. No weapons unless absolutely necessary. We can't afford to lose anyone else." The 2,000 souls who remained represented a cross-section of those deemed expendable: maintenance workers, lower caste members of hierarchical species, political refugees, and those whose biological needs had been deemed too resource-intensive to justify evacuation. What united them now was the simple, desperate drive to survive. Daily life had become a constant battle against entropy. The station's fusion reactor, designed for minimal maintenance, continued functioning, but many secondary systems had begun failing without proper parts or expert attention. Recycling units operated at 60% efficiency. Food production barely met caloric needs. Medicine ran short, especially for species with specific biological requirements. Jin Wu, the young agricultural specialist, had proven particularly valuable, modifying the hydroponic systems to grow compatible food for multiple species. His innovative crossbreeding of algae varieties had prevented starvation during the worst months. Meanwhile, elderly engineer Yoon Seo kept the aging atmosphere processors running through increasingly creative workarounds that would have horrified their manufacturers. The station's governing council, representatives chosen from each remaining species, met weekly in the former diplomatic chamber. Their debates had grown increasingly tense as resources dwindled, but they maintained a fragile unity born of necessity. "We should consider abandoning the outer rings entirely," proposed Gi-hun, the Serpentine Ophidian representative, during one particularly heated session. "Concentrate our people in the central hub, where maintaining life support requires less energy." "My people cannot survive in the humidity levels of the central hub," countered Na-Young, speaking for the crystalline Viroxy. Her translucent skin refracted light as she gestured emphatically. "The outer rings contain the only habitats where we can breathe comfortably." These debates always ended the same way, with compromise that satisfied no one, but kept everyone alive for another cycle. Children born after the Great Retreat had never known any home but the station. They played in repurposed cargo bays, Learning survival skills alongside cultural traditions their elders desperately tried to preserve. Young Sunhai, born to human parents who had died in a pressure accident, was being raised by a community of mixed species. She spoke 7 languages and could identify critical system failures by sound alone. Despite their differences, the abandoned colonists had formed bonds that transcended their biological distinctions. Former enemies became neighbors, then friends, then family. Species that had once warred across galaxies now shared meals and mourned each other's dead. Their last connection to the wider galaxy had been the automated communication relay. Once, each month a burst transmission would arrive, always the same recorded message. Quarantine remains in effect. Maintain position. Aid pending situation resolution. The message had offered little practical help, but had provided something perhaps more important, hope that they had not been completely forgotten. Then came the meteorite storm. The collision had been devastating, ripping through the station's northern quadrant and destroying the communication array in a shower of molten metal and crystal shards. 8 colonists died in the impact, 12 more in the aftermath as emergency systems struggled to contain the damage. Standing in the scorched wreckage of what had been their link to civilization, Hyunki had felt something shift inside him. The pretense was over. No one was coming. Whatever future they might have would be one they built themselves. That night, as the station's inhabitants gathered in the central commons, he spoke plainly. From this day forward, we stop waiting for rescue. This station is our home. We are not refugees anymore, we are founders. Our children will not be abandoned survivors, but the first generation of whatever we choose to build here. The words had resonated across species boundaries, across the divides of biology and culture. In the darkness of space, abandoned by those who should have protected them, the colonists of Proxima Station had discovered something unexpected, a collective strength that might just be enough to survive. The endless hum of failing machinery had become so constant that Jiho barely noticed it anymore. His blue Arcturian skin gleamed under the flickering lights of Maintenance Corridor B as he crawled through a service duct data tablet clutched between his teeth. At 26 station years, he was considered young by most species standards, but responsibility had aged him beyond his years. "Hand me the phase coupler," he mumbled around the tablet, reaching back without looking. His third eye, centered in his forehead and evolved for detailed technical work, remained focused on the tangle of wires before him. Silence answered him. Jiho sighed and extracted himself from the duct, finding his assistant slumped against the wall, fast asleep. The young Terran boy had volunteered to help after school hours, but exhaustion had claimed another victim. "Go back to your quarters, Junhee," Jiho said gently, shaking the boy awake. "Tell Teacher Suk I approved your technical credits for today." Left alone, Jiho gathered his tools. The environmental system was failing faster than they could patch it. Without replacement parts, they were simply shifting problems around the station, fixing one section by cannibalizing another. He had been awake for nearly 30 hours straight, but the primary air filtration system wouldn't repair itself. As he trudged toward his next repair site, a strange sound caught his attention, a rhythmic tapping from behind a service panel that hadn't been opened in years. Curious, Jiho pried it loose, revealing a small maintenance robot, its lights dim but still operational. The outdated model, nicknamed Skitters for their rapid movement patterns, had been decommissioned before the Great Retreat. "Well, hello there," Jiho whispered, carefully extracting the tiny machine. "What were you doing in there all this time?" The Skitter's optical sensors focused on him, its processors whirring as it attempted to fulfill its last command. It projected a small hologram showing a storage bay location in the station's lowest level. "You want me to follow you?" Jiho asked, fatigue momentarily forgotten. "Lead the way, little one." The journey took them through rarely used corridors and down emergency ladders to levels that had been sealed off to conserve resources. The Skitter moved with determination, occasionally pausing to allow Jiho to override security locks or clear debris. The storage bay door was jammed halfway, open, the mechanism frozen from years of disuse. Jiho squeezed through the gap, activating his wrist light to pierce the darkness. The beam revealed rows of crates covered in dust, preservation film still intact on most. "What treasure did you bring me to?" he murmured, scanning container labels. Most held mundane supplies, outdated calibration tools, replacement parts for systems no longer in use. The skitter scurried to a container in the far corner, its metal feet tapping impatiently against the floor. Jiho followed, curiosity overcoming caution. The container was military-grade, with faded Confederation insignia and security locks that had long since lost power. 6 hours later, Taiwan's massive frame filled the doorway of Jiho's workshop. The burly engineer had to duck to enter, his thick neck and broad shoulders a testament to his Caridian heritage. Despite appearing mostly human, the high-gravity world of his ancestors had shaped his people into living tanks. "You called me down. Here for what?" Taiwan grumbled, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "I was in the middle of recalibrating the—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the device spread across Jiho's workbench. "Is that what I think it is?" Jiho nodded excitedly, his third eye dilating with enthusiasm. "A Confederation emergency. Subspace beacon, military-grade, pre-retreat technology. Where did you find this relic?" Taiwan asked, running his thick fingers over the device's housing reverently. "Storage bay on level 5. Been there the whole time." Jiho couldn't keep the excitement from his voice. "It's completely self-contained, has its own power source, quantum battery still at 62% capacity. And best of all, it operates on frequencies outside our standard communication array." Taiwan looked up sharply. "You mean—" "Yes," Jiho confirmed. "This doesn't need our destroyed comm array. It can send a signal directly through subspace. The range is limited, but it's something we didn't have yesterday." For the first time in months, Jiho saw hope flicker in the engineer's eyes. Administrator Hyun-ki was less enthusiastic when they presented their discovery at the emergency council meeting. "And you believe this device still functions after all? These years?" he asked skeptically, examining the beacon from behind his desk. "The diagnostics check out," Taiwan confirmed. "Jiho has recalibrated the targeting systems. It's designed to broadcast continuously for up to 2 standard years on emergency channels." Council member Ra-jin, representing the arthropoid Sikiri, colonists clicked her mandibles doubtfully. "Who would even be listening on these frequencies? The Confederation abandoned them when they abandoned us. Independent traders might," Jiho countered. "Explorers, anyone operating outside Confederation jurisdiction. Or scavengers who would finish stripping what remains of our home," added Jun Seo, the station's medical officer, his luminescent skin casting a soft glow around him. The debate raged for hours. Some saw the beacon as their last hope. Others viewed it as a dangerous invitation to hostile forces. The station's winter cycle was approaching, a period when the moon's orbit took it behind the gas giant, plunging them into weeks of darkness and extreme cold. Power demands would increase dramatically, while solar collection would cease entirely. "Even if we were heard, help would come too late," argued Kaite, his reptilian features hardening. "We should focus on our survival plan, consolidating habitats, reducing active sections." "You mean sacrificing the outer rings," countered Hajun, who represented the residents of those very sections. "Condemning 400 colonists to relocate or worse." Hyun-ki raised his hand for silence. The chamber grew quiet, all eyes turning to the administrator. "We will activate the beacon," he announced finally. "Not because I believe rescue is coming, but because our people need something to hope for besides survival. Jiho Taiwan, you have my authorization. Make it work." 3 days later, as the station's night cycle began, a small crowd gathered on the observation deck. Through the viewport, they could see the beacon positioned on the moon's surface, a small silver object against the vast darkness. Jiho and Taiwan had transported it outside for maximum range, their EVA suits collecting moon dust as they carefully calibrated the device. "Ready?" Jiho asked through his comlink. Taiwan nodded inside his helmet, initiating broadcast sequence. The beacon hummed to life, a soft blue light pulsing at its core. Within moments, it projected a signal outward, invisible to the naked eye but carrying their location, situation, and desperate need for assistance. As they watched from the viewport, many colonists wept openly. The beacon seemed impossibly small against the void of space, one tiny light fighting against overwhelming darkness. Yet somehow, that small, defiant pulse of energy represented everything they had become. Damaged but functional, forgotten but surviving, abandoned but not defeated. "Do you really think anyone will hear us?" Young Minju asked, pressing her six-fingered hand against the cold viewport glass. Jiho knelt beside her, watching the distant beacon continue its rhythmic pulse. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But now at least we're shouting instead of whispering." That night, as the station's systems struggled against the approaching winter, the colonists of Proxima Station slept a little easier, not because rescue seemed likely, but because they had refused to surrender to silence. 42. Days after activating the beacon, the Council made their final decision. The Outer Ring habitats would be shut down. Resources could no longer support all sections of Proxima Station through the approaching winter. The motion passed by a single vote. "We begin evacuation tomorrow," Yunki announced, his voice hollow, as he addressed the gathered representatives. "Ring residents will be relocated to emergency quarters in the central hub. Essential belongings only. No exceptions." The mood in the council chamber was somber. Even those who had voted for the measure took no satisfaction in their victory. 400 lives disrupted, generations of carefully constructed living spaces abandoned to the cold. For many species, these personalized habitats represented more than shelter. They were extensions of their biological and cultural needs. "I'll begin preparations in medical," offered Jun Seo, his luminescent skin dimmed with fatigue. "We'll need extra support for those whose physiology struggles with relocation stress." Jiho stood at the back of the chamber, watching defeat settle across the faces around him. The beacon had been broadcasting for weeks with no response. Even he had begun to lose hope. That's when the proximity alarm shattered the silence. The harsh, pulsing tone hadn't been heard on Proxima Station since the last supply ship departed 3 years earlier. For a moment, everyone froze, unable to process the forgotten sound. "We have an unidentified vessel approaching from Sector 9, Sangmin's voice crackled over the emergency comm system. "All council members report to command immediately." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as council members rushed in. The main view screen displayed a ship approaching their moon at reduced speed, clearly on an intercept course with the station. "Configuration unknown," reported Ye Jun, the sensor specialist, her feathered crest standing on end with excitement. "For it doesn't match any Confederation design in our database." "Weapons status?" demanded Do Yun, the security chief. "Scanning. Energy signatures suggest defensive capabilities, but weapon systems appear inactive," Ye Jun replied, her taloned fingers flying across the control panel. "They're slowing to synchronous orbit." Hyun Ki stepped forward, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. Open communication channels. For several tense moments, nothing happened. The strange vessel continued its approach, sleek and functional with unusual geometric patterns along its hull. It was smaller than Confederation cruisers, but larger than most trading vessels, with what appeared to be modular components that suggested adaptability for different missions. Then the communication panel chimed. "They're responding," Ye Jun gasped, "but they're using protocols that haven't been standard for decades." "Put it through," ordered Hyun Ki. The view screen flickered, resolving into the image of a command bridge unlike any they recognized, and at its center stood a human woman in a dark uniform with unfamiliar insignia. Her features reflected Earth ancestry, but with subtle differences from the humans of Proxima Station. "This is Captain Yun Ji of the United Nations spaceship Pathfinder," she announced, her voice clear despite the distance. "We've received your distress beacon. Proxima Station, do you copy?" Stunned silence filled the command center. Humans had been among the least advanced species integrated into the Confederation. Their home planet, Earth, had barely achieved reliable interstellar travel when the sector was abandoned. Now they appeared in a ship that, while unfamiliar, clearly represented technology beyond what they should possess. Hyun Ki stepped forward. "This is Administrator Hyun Ki of Proxima Station. We copy you, Captain. Your assistance is unexpected." The human captain's expression softened slightly. "We detected your subspace beacon while surveying this system for potential colonization. Our records showed this sector was abandoned during the plague crisis, but we didn't expect to find survivors." Murmurs spread through the command center. The humans were looking for colony sites? Had they developed their own expansion program while isolated from the Confederation? "Captain," Hyun-Ki continued carefully, "forgive my directness, but humans were not technologically positioned to undertake independent stellar exploration when the Confederation retreated from this sector." A subtle smile crossed Captain Yunji's face. "Much has changed in the last few years, Administrator. When the advanced species pulled back to protect their core worlds, humanity was largely left to fend for itself. We adapted. Necessity proved quite motivating. The implication struck everyone present. While the Confederation had withdrawn to save itself, humanity had pushed forward, developing in isolation. Your station appears to have sustained significant damage," the captain continued, gesturing to someone off-screen. "With your permission, we'd like to dock and offer assistance. Our ship carries supplies and repair equipment that might prove useful to your situation." The council members exchanged wary glances. After years of abandonment, the sudden appearance of help, from an unexpected source no less, seemed too convenient to trust completely. Do-Yun leaned close to Hyun-Ki. "This could be a trap," he whispered. "Pirates have been known to use humanitarian pretexts. If they wanted to take the station by force, they could have attacked without announcing themselves," Hyun-Ki countered. Then to the screen, "Captain Hyunji, we would welcome your assistance. However, I must inform you that our docking systems are severely compromised. Only Bay 3 remains operational, and even that requires manual override." "Understood, Administrator. We've developed flexible docking capabilities for exactly these situations. Our shuttle can adapt to your specifications. Request permission to dispatch a landing party of 6 personnel with preliminary supplies." The request was reasonable. Small, enough not to pose an obvious threat, yet sufficient to provide meaningful help. Hyun-Ki looked around at the council members, receiving nods of cautious agreement. "Permission granted, Captain. We'll prepare Bay 3 to receive you." 2 hours later, the entire station buzzed with nervous energy. Word of the approaching ship had spread rapidly, inspiring equal measures of hope and suspicion. Security teams positioned themselves discreetly throughout the docking area, while medical staff prepared for potential new pathogens despite the ship's assurances of decontamination protocols. Ji-Ho stood with Tae-won near the airlock, watching the external. Cameras as the human shuttle detached from the larger vessel and maneuvered toward the station with impressive precision. "I still can't believe it," Tae-won murmured. "The beacon actually worked." "And humans of all species answered," Ji-Ho added, his third eye blinking rapidly in excitement. "Makes you wonder what else they've accomplished while the Confederation wasn't watching." The shuttle completed its docking procedure with a gentle thud that reverberated through the station. Pressure equalized, indicator lights shifted from red to green, and the massive airlock door slowly cycled open. Captain Yoon-ji stepped through first, her uniform crisp despite the journey. 5 crew members followed, each carrying equipment cases, marked with unfamiliar symbols. They moved with the cautious confidence of people trained for first contact scenarios. The captain approached Hyun-Ki and offered a formal bow rather than the Confederation's standard greeting gesture, a subtle acknowledgement that old protocols might no longer apply. "Administrator Hyun-Ki," she said warmly, "on behalf of Earth and her colonies, we're honored to meet you and your people. We have much to discuss." As the humans began distributing emergency supplies and setting up diagnostic equipment, the colonists watched with a mixture of awe and lingering disbelief. The abandoned had been found, the forgotten had been remembered, and their rescuers were the last species anyone would have expected. Winter was still coming to Proxima Station, but for the first time in years, its approach no longer felt like an ending. "You're telling me you've kept this environmental system running for 3 years with modified parts from kitchen appliances?" Lieutenant Jun-ho stared at the jury-rigged machinery with undisguised admiration. "That shouldn't be possible." Ji-Ho shrugged, all three of his eyes blinking with modest pride. We had no choice. The primary filtration components failed 6 months after the evacuation. No replacement parts meant we had to improvise. The human engineer shook his head, kneeling to examine the makeshift connections more closely. This is genius-level work. On Earth, we'd call this elegant desperation. He pulled a compact scanning device from his utility belt and waved it over the system. With your permission, I'd like to document this solution. Our colonization teams could learn from your adaptations. Similar. Scenes played out across Proxima Station as the human crew integrated with the colonists. Captain Yunji had distributed her personnel strategically: engineers to assess critical systems, medical staff to evaluate health concerns, and cultural specialists to facilitate communication between humans and the station's diverse species. In Tsi, the hydroponics bay, Dr. Mi Kyung, the Pathfinder's exobotanist, worked alongside Jinwoo, examining his hybrid algae strains with fascination. "You've created an entirely new subspecies," she marveled, adjusting her microscope. "The nutrient profile is remarkably efficient." Jinwoo smiled shyly. "Necessity forced experimentation. Many species here have specific dietary requirements that our limited resources couldn't support separately. On Nova Terra, our second colony world, we faced similar challenges," Mi Kyung explained. "But we had the advantage of our seed banks and genetic archives. You achieved this with remnant stocks and intuition." The humans moved through the station with an energy that seemed to revitalize the weary colonists. They carried tools unlike anything seen before, compact, versatile devices that adapted to multiple functions. Their uniforms contained integrated systems that monitored environmental conditions and vital signs. Most striking was their collaborative approach. They consulted the colonists as equals, rather than treating them as helpless victims. By the second day, temporary repairs had stabilized the station's critical systems. The humans had brought supplies, not charity handouts, but targeted resources based on their quick assessment of needs. Replacement parts were fabricated on the spot, using portable manufacturing units that the human crew called printers. In the mess hall that evening, Captain Yunji shared a meal with Administrator Hyun Ki and the council members. The humans had brought fresh provisions, real food, not the endlessly recycled nutrition that had sustained the station for years. "Your people have accomplished something remarkable," Yunji said, addressing the group. "Most abandoned outposts we've found were long dead or reduced to barbarism. You've maintained not just survival, but a functioning society." "We had no alternative," Hyun-Ki replied simply. "Die together or live together." The choice was clear. "Yet, you've done more than survive," added Commander Tae-Hyun, the Pathfinder's first officer. "You've preserved knowledge, maintained technology beyond your resource levels, and protected the vulnerable among you. Many human colonies failed with far more advantages." Security Chief Sang-Ho remained silent during this exchange, his dark eyes studying the humans with practiced suspicion. Earlier that day, he had accessed the exterior camera feeds, capturing images of the Pathfinder in orbit. The vessel was clearly more than the exploration and colonization ship they claimed. Its hull architecture included reinforced sections consistent with military design. Sensor arrays positioned around its perimeter suggested defensive capabilities beyond what peaceful explorers would require. "Captain," Sang-Ho interjected suddenly, "your generosity is appreciated, but I'm curious. What brought humans to this sector? It's far from Earth and still technically under Confederation quarantine." A brief silence fell over the table. The other council members shifted uncomfortably at the direct question. Yunji met his gaze steadily. "A fair question, Chief Sang-Ho. The truth is multifaceted. Yes, we're exploring for viable colony worlds. Earth's population continues to grow, and our people have a deep desire to expand. But we're also mapping abandoned Confederation territory for strategic purposes." "Strategic?" Sang-Ho pressed. "Humanity's relationship with the Confederation has been complicated," Yunji explained carefully. "When they withdrew during the Void Plague crisis, they effectively abandoned dozens of human settlements beyond Earth. Those colonies that survived learned harsh lessons about self-reliance, Commander Taehyun added. As Earth recovered and reconnected with our surviving colonies, we realized our position had fundamentally changed. We could no longer depend on the Confederation for protection or technology. So you developed your own, Hyun-ki observed. We did, Yoon-ji nodded, often by unconventional paths that the Confederation had dismissed as inefficient or impractical. What you see on the Pathfinder represents 15 years of accelerated development, driven by necessity and unburdened by traditional constraints. Sang-ho leaned forward. And the weapon systems, are those also necessities? A tense silence fell over the table. The human officers exchanged glances. You've been scanning our ship, Yoon-ji stated. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. My responsibility is station security, Sang-ho replied unapologetically, and your vessel carries significant offensive capabilities for an exploration ship. Rather than deny it, Yoon-ji sighed. The universe we re-entered after the plague wasn't the one we remembered. While the Confederation withdrew to protect its core worlds, power vacuums emerged. Pirates, opportunists, even some Confederation splinter groups turned predatory. 3 of our early outreach missions never returned. She activated a small holoprojector on her wrist. A 3-dimensional star map appeared, showing dozens of locations marked in different colors. The green markers represent stable human colonies. Yellow shows outposts we've established contact with. Red indicates confirmed hostile encounters. She gestured to several clusters of red markers. We learned quickly that exploration without adequate defense was suicide. The council members studied the map with growing understanding. The human expansion was more extensive than they had imagined. Dozens of worlds across multiple systems, forming a network independent of Confederation authority. You've built your own interstellar community, Jun Seo observed, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with increasing brightness, a sign of emotional intensity among his species. We had no choice, Taehyun said, unconsciously echoing Hyun-ki's earlier words. But we established principles from the beginning. We would remember what it felt like to be abandoned. We would never leave our people behind again, and we would extend that same commitment to others we found in need. Sang-ho still appeared skeptical, but before he could press further, an emergency alert sounded throughout the station. Ye-jun's voice came over the communication system, tense but controlled. Administrator, long-range sensors have detected an approaching vessel. Confederation registry, automated scout class. Current trajectory will bring it to our position in approximately 6 hours. The colonists froze, expressions shifting from surprise to fear. After years of silence, the Confederation had returned, just as their unexpected human allies had arrived. Captain Yoon-ji stood immediately. Administrator, I need to return to my ship. The Confederation doesn't know about our operations in this sector, and they might interpret our presence as hostile. As the humans prepared to depart, Sang-ho caught Yoon-ji's arm. Captain, I still don't fully trust your intentions, but I believe one thing. You're not like the people who abandoned us. Yoon-ji nodded solemnly. Chief Sang-ho, humanity remembers what it means to be considered expendable. We won't make the same mistake with you. The Confederation scout ship emerged from subspace with clinical precision, its sleek hull reflecting the distant light of Tau Ceti. Unlike the Pathfinder's practical modular design, the automated vessel displayed the Confederation's characteristic aesthetic, elegant, minimal, and coldly efficient. No crew controlled it. Instead, advanced AI systems executed pre-programmed protocols with ruthless logic. In Proxima Station's command center, tension crackled through the air as colonists and humans alike watched the newcomers approach on the main view screen. It's not responding to standard hails, reported Ye-jun, her feathered crest flattened with anxiety. I've tried all Confederation emergency frequencies. Administrator Hyun-ki stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. After 3 years of silence, they finally return and ignore us completely. On a secondary screen, Captain Yoon-ji's face appeared from the Pathfinder's bridge. Administrator, the scout is scanning our ship with targeting systems. Its weapon platforms are powering up. The scout's behavior confirmed what many had suspected. The Confederation considered the station and its inhabitants expendable. Their only interest was the unauthorized human vessel in their claimed territory. A mechanical voice suddenly echoed through the command center as the scout ship finally responded, not to the station's hails, but broadcasting on an open channel. Unidentified. Vessel in restricted Confederation space. You are in violation of Quarantine Protocol 7 Alpha. Withdraw immediately or face neutralization. You have 3 minutes to comply. The message repeated in 15 different languages, its tone unchanging. They're not even acknowledging that. We exist, whispered Rajin, her mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Captain Yunji's expression hardened on the screen. Administrator, request permission to deploy defensive countermeasures. We don't want a confrontation, but that scout carries enough firepower to cripple both my ship and your station if it chooses. Before Hyun-Ki could respond, Security Chief Sang-Ho stepped forward. The scout's primary directive will be information gathering. The Confederation doesn't know about humanity's expansion. They'll prioritize returning that intelligence over engaging in combat. You're suggesting we use that to our advantage? Hyun-Ki asked. I'm suggesting we change the equation, Sang-Ho replied. The scout perceives one unauthorized ship. What if instead it faced an alliance? Understanding dawned on Hyun-Ki's face. Without hesitation, he turned to the communications console. Open a channel, maximum broadcast range, all frequencies including the scout's command protocols. Yejun's fingers flew across the controls. Channel open, Administrator. Hyun-Ki drew himself to his full height, his voice unwavering. Confederation Automated Scout 7729, this is Administrator Hyun-Ki of Proxima Station. The UNSS Pathfinder is here under our formal protection and invitation. Any hostile action against this vessel will be considered an act of war against both humanity and the united colonies of this sector. On screen, they watched as the scout ship hesitated, its weapon systems still active but not firing. Its AI was processing this unexpected development, a scenario not covered in its programming. Captain Yunji seized the moment, maneuvering the Pathfinder into position between the scout and the station. The human vessel's defense systems activated, creating a shimmering energy field around its hull. Confederation Scout, Yunji broadcast, this is Captain Yunji of the United Nations spaceship Pathfinder. We propose immediate diplomatic communications regarding the status of this sector and its inhabitants. The quarantine situation has evolved, as has humanity's position in interstellar affairs. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity as the scout processed these declarations. Its weapons remained powered but did not fire. Finally, the mechanical voice returned. Transmitting situation update to Confederation Central Command. Maintaining. Position pending further instructions. Diplomatic protocols initiated. A collective breath of relief swept through the command center. It wasn't a retreat, but neither was it an attack. They blinked, Taewon murmured in disbelief. No, corrected Ji-ho, his third eye widening with understanding. They calculated. The variables changed and their equation no longer balanced. Hours later, representatives from Proxima Station and the Pathfinder gathered in the newly repaired Council Chamber. The scout ship remained in orbit, passive but watchful, awaiting instructions from distant Confederation authorities that might take days or weeks to arrive. Captain Yunji stood before the assembled group, the formal stiffness, or first contact, now replaced by the comfortable demeanor of an ally. The scout's response gives us valuable time, but we should use it wisely. I propose something more substantial than a temporary alliance. She activated a holographic display showing a network of stars, with Earth and its colonies highlighted in blue. Humanity has established 17 self-sufficient colonies across this region. Each operates with local autonomy, but shared resources and protection. We've encountered 6 other abandoned outposts like yours and integrated them into our network. Integration? Questioned Do-Yun skeptically. You mean absorption. I mean partnership, Yunji countered firmly. Each community maintains its governance and cultural identity. What we share are resources, technology, defense, and a commitment that no one gets left behind again. The proposal sparked intense debate among the colonists. Some feared exchanging one master for another. Others saw opportunity in this unexpected alliance. Hyun-ki listened to all perspectives before addressing the captain. "And what does Earth gain from such arrangements?" "Diversity," Yunji answered without hesitation. "Knowledge. Each species brings unique perspectives and abilities. The Confederation model treated different species as hierarchical, core worlds and peripheral dependencies. We've found that genuine collaboration produces better results." She gestured to Commander Tae-hyun, who stepped forward. "Many of our technological advances came from integrating ideas considered impractical by Confederation standards. The very shield technology that protected us today was developed by combining human power generation with crystalline focusing techniques we learned from refugees of the Viroxy homeworld." Na-young, the Viroxy representative, gasped softly. "My people's world was considered lost. 3,000 survivors established. A colony on Nova Lumina," Tae-hyun confirmed. "They've preserved your cultural archives and scientific knowledge." As the implications rippled through the chamber, Lieutenant Jun-ho added, "Your algae hybridization techniques could revolutionize food production on our frontier colonies, and the atmospheric processing modifications you've developed here could make previously uninhabitable worlds viable." Ji-ho realized what the humans were offering. Not rescue, but recognition. Not charity, but partnership. They saw value in what the abandoned had created from desperation. 3 days later, as the first transport prepared to carry volunteers to the nearest human colony, Hyun-ki stood with Captain Yoonji in the observation dome. Below them, colonists and human crew worked side by side, installing upgraded systems throughout the station. The Confederation scout remained in orbit, silent and watching, a reminder of the old order that had discarded them. "Not everyone will leave," Hyun-ki noted, watching families sorting belongings for the journey. "Many still consider this home despite everything, and they'll have that choice," Yoonji assured him. "Proxima Station can become a hub in our network. With proper supplies and support, it could thrive again." Hyun-ki turned to face the vast gas giant that dominated the viewport. "When the Confederation abandoned us, we thought it was the end. We never imagined it would lead to a new beginning. That's the paradox that shaped humanity's journey," Yoonji replied thoughtfully. "Being left behind forced us to find our own path. We learned that the most valuable survival trait isn't strength or intelligence. It's the ability to reach out and connect, especially when things seem darkest." As the first transport vessel prepared for departure, carrying colonists toward new possibilities with their unexpected allies, Hyun-ki reflected that perhaps being forgotten had been their salvation. In the vacuum left by abandonment, they had found not just humanity, but a deeper understanding of what connection truly meant. The Pathfinder's lights gleamed against the darkness of space, not as conquerors or saviors, but as fellow travelers, who remembered what it meant to stand alone against the void, and who refused to let others face that darkness unaccompanied. The HFY.